In a big blow to the U.S. President Donald Trump, a federal court has blocked his so-called reciprocal tariffs under emergency powers. The Court of International Trade in New York declared the orders issued on what Trump called Liberation Day as illegal and an overreach of power. Now, the court has not only put a permanent halt to most of the tariffs, it's also barred any future modifications to them. The Trump administration was swift to appeal the ruling. Trump is yet to respond to the ruling, but a White House spokesperson claimed that unelected judges cannot decide how to address a national emergency. In an attempt to justify the tariffs, the Trump administration cited the recent ceasefire between India and Pakistan. In a submission to court, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said, and I quote, "This ceasefire was only achieved after President Trump interceded and offered both nations trading access with the United States to avert a full-scale war," end of quote. Lutnick went on to say that any adverse ruling will constrain presidential powers and could lead to India and Pakistan questioning Trump's offer, which in turn threatens the security of an entire region. The judge did not accept this argument and ruled that sweeping tariffs invoking an emergency law was an overreach. Surabhi joins us now with more on the U.S. court's tariff order and its implications for the Trump administration and his tariff juggernaut. Surabhi.
Well, almost 2 months after it was unleashed on the world, the Trump tariff juggernaut has finally hit a legal roadblock. On Wednesday, the U.S. Court of International Trade struck down a series of executive orders which had put Trump's global tariffs in motion. The court's view is that the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which the U.S. president had actually invoked while declaring a national economic emergency back in April, simply doesn't authorize him to take unilateral tariff calls and levy universal tariffs. Basically, the court has said that Trump has overstepped the authority that was granted to him by the legislation. And those are the highlights that we just had on the screen earlier. These are the executive orders. So let's talk about what these executive orders were, which have been struck down. Now, the court has basically said that there are 4 executive orders that have been struck down. So let's start with the latest one, Executive Order number 14257. With this order being declared invalid and quote-unquote contrary to law, Trump's 10% baseline tariffs, as well as the reciprocal tariffs, which were levied on countries around the world, become null and void. The other executive orders that have been struck down render the fentanyl tariffs levied on Canada, Mexico, and China invalid. Finally, the court order also strikes down the 25% tariffs levied on goods that were not covered by the US-Canada-Mexico agreement. It is, however, important to note that the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum remain unaffected by the court's order, as these were imposed under a different act, a different piece of legislation, and I'll come to that in more detail in just a bit. So what happens now? Well, the U.S. administration has already swung into action, and it has challenged the trade court's order at the U.S. Court of Appeals. Legal experts feel that this battle, in all probability, is likely to head to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, in the meantime, Trump has several other legal options in his arsenal to keep the tariff heat on. The first of them is a wider use of Section 232 of the U.S. Trade Expansion Act. Remember the steel and aluminum tariffs, which I just spoke about, and they're still in effect? Now, they have been levied under this very section of the Act. Trump could expand the scope of this Section 232 to other sectors as well. In fact, the administration is already evaluating potential tariffs on aviation, on electronics, and pharma imports under this Section 232. So watch for this. Next, there is the U.S. Trade Act of 1974. Section 122 of this particular act allows the president to levy a baseline tariff of up to 15% to address quote-unquote balance of payment concerns. And, the current trade issues could fall in this category. The levies can last up to 150 days without the need for any sort of congressional approval. Let's move on. There is then the Section 301 of the same U.S. Trade Act. This allows the U.S. government to launch a wide trade investigation against any U.S. trading partner and then impose tariff levies. However, this could be a very cumbersome and time-consuming route, so may not be the U.S. administration's first port of call. Finally, there is the option of using the U.S. Tariff Act of 1930, which has not been used till now. The section number 338 of this legislation allows the U.S. to levy up to 50% tariffs on imports coming from countries which discriminate against the U.S. That's a pretty wide term, so it can be interpreted in any way. Now, as the tariff war takes a legal turn, here's a statement from the White House spokesperson, Kush Desai. This was immediately after the court order. He went on to say, and you can see it on the screen, it is not for unelected judges to decide how to properly address a national emergency. So this was first. And then we had a social media post from the man himself, Donald Trump. And it's very cryptic, but he goes on social media and he says he's on a mission from God and nothing can stop what is coming. Now, it's cryptic, whether it means more tariffs, the use of any one of these factors that I describe, only time will tell. But the markets could be rejoicing for now in the interim. However, the only thing that is certain after Wednesday's court ruling is that this is only round one of the legal battle, that the US president has a wide array of legal and executive options in his arsenal to keep the tariff blitzkrieg on.
For more news and updates, all you need to do is follow CNBC TV18 on all of our digital platforms.